Welcome, everybody. My name is Susan Bontly, and I'm one of the librarians at DACC. And today's topic for our presentation series is using Turnitin to write better papers. We have a lot to cover, but first we'll start with introducing some of the people that are behind the scenes. We have Jose Aranda, who is providing technical support, and he will be monitoring the chat. So in case you have any questions or any technical difficulties, please go ahead and put them in the chat. You can chat privately, or you can just do it to everyone. And he will also be putting in any links that are important for you to know about. We also have several library members here. Therese DeSimio, who is the director of our library, and Becky Poncet, who is over here at Espina with myself, and several others may be joining us later. But welcome to everybody. Let's get started. We have a couple of housekeeping. Yes, the presentation is being recorded, as you just heard, and a transcript will be made available. Please keep your microphone muted so as not to disturb the presentation or other people. The background noise sometimes is a distraction. And like I said earlier, please go ahead, and if you have any questions related to the presentation or anything about the library, be sure and put them in the chat. And at the end, we'll take a few moments to answer them. If I am going along and you have a question related directly to what has just been presented, go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself and say, hey, I got a question. We're a little bit informal here. The presentation should take about 25, 30 minutes, unless there's a lot of questions. And there'll be time, like I said, at the end to ask any other questions. So let's get started. Our presentation is going to cover several aspects of Turnitin. First of all, I have a after I do the overview, I have a couple of questions to ask you. I'm trying out polls and I'm hoping to get some good feedback from them. But we're going to cover what is Turnitin, how does it work? As a student, how do you interpret the results that you get from Turnitin? And what are the next steps you can do after you get your results to improve your writing? And places on NMSU, DAC campuses where you can get additional help, both virtually and in person. So let's first start with the first question, even though it says question 2. If you would please go ahead and choose the most important reason that you are here. I'll give it a few more seconds and then we'll in the poll. All right. Oh, hi, Kathy. Okay, will this recording be available to them? Yes, it will. In fact, we have a website that will include this information, anything I talk about today, as well as the presentation link. So it will be available to them to refer to or for you to direct them to. So right now we've got, out of the 3 people who answered, we have one wants to know more about Turnitin, and 2 of them didn't have a reason listed on these 3. Depending on who was attending, and we had several students sign up, they haven't shown up yet, so maybe they'll come ask for the link afterwards. So the results are right there. All right. I've got another question for you. And this one, you can click more than one. What do you think the purpose of Turnitin is? Is it to keep you from plagiarizing? Is it to identify areas of your assignment that may be plagiarized? Or to help you write more effective papers? And remember, you can answer more than one. You can choose as many as you think are necessary. Okay, we got 100% in the poll and sharing the results. So one of you thought it was to keep you from plagiarizing, which is true, it is. 3 out of the 4 of you thought that it's to identify areas of your assignment that may be plagiarized, and that's correct too. And also to help you write more effective papers. 3 of you said yes, that was one of the primary, most important primary purposes of Turnitin. Well, believe it or not, all 3 are correct, but a lot of times number C, students don't realize that, and instructors, that it is really a great tool to help students understand how to incorporate sources into their writing and do it following the academic guidelines and the citation formatting guidelines of whatever citation format is necessary for that particular discipline or whatever the professor chooses to use, be it APA or MLA or maybe Chicago or something like that. So we're going to talk more about writing more effective papers, but yes, a lot of universities use it as a deterrent to keep students from plagiarizing. The problem is the research shows that that's not always the case. It doesn't necessarily keep those that are going to plagiarize from plagiarizing. They are coming up with more and more ways to circumvent the being caught. And Turnitin is always working on new ways to keep that from happening. But if a student is lazy enough or doesn't understand, it's different between intentional and non-intentional plagiarism. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So let's get into the next question. Is what is Turnitin? It gives students feedback on the originality of their work, and it will help you minimize the chance of unintentionally plagiarizing. Like I said before, if someone wants to plagiarize, they're going to do it. It's for those that really want to improve their writing, that really would like to know the areas where they are getting close to that line to, is it plagiarism or is it not plagiarism? It can help students improve and be better academic writers and cite their sources better and use the tools that are out there to make sure that their papers shine. We recommend, we meaning the institution of NMSU and DACC, that it be used to help the students become better academic writers and incorporate their sources properly. It's not being used as much as for the primary reason of deterring or catching students plagiarizing. It's to help students learn the proper way to cite their sources and incorporate them into their writing. And a lot of times students aren't aware of how to do that as much as they need to be. How does it work? A lot of it depends on how it's set up by the instructor. And there are only certain file types that Turnitin will recognize, and it's a long list, but Instructors need to be aware of that, and they should put that as part of the assignment criteria. You can upload a Word document. If it's a Google document, it has to be in a certain format. If some can take PDFs, some even can do Excel spreadsheets and things like that. But there is a specific file type that they use to scan to compare to what is in their repository. And then it searches for text matching. It searches the repository. If that option is selected by your instructor, which it may or may not, it definitely searches online for books, journals, and other publications. And then it searches websites and the rest of the internet. So it has a lot of places to go look for text matching. The default setting is that it looks for 6 or more successive matching words. And that can be fine-tuned or turned off with your instructor. Instructors have a little bit more leeway, and I'm not going to go into describing why they would do this or how they would fine-tune it. That's for another presentation oriented towards the instructors. If your paper has been submitted to the Turnitin's repository, then it becomes available for anyone who is using Turnitin's repository, that they can compare the paper at their institution with yours that is stored in the repository. So for students that are transferring from universities, it's not really a good idea to take a paper you wrote in your first English class at, let's say, UNM, and then you transfer to NMSU and use that same paper for English 2, the second level of English. If UNM is using the repository and your instructor turns on the repository here at NMSU or DACC, then they're going to find a match. And it's not considered to be good academic practice to reuse or resubmit. A lot of times in the syllabus, it says you have to have original work for that particular class. You cannot reuse something you've already turned in for a grade in a different class. So be aware of that. You can self-plagiarize yourself. You can go ahead and reuse your own words. And if you are on a graduate level or a master's level, PhD or something like that, or let's say you're a senior and you've been working on a project the entire time you've been in school, you just need to let your professor know that, hey, I wrote some stuff on this earlier. I'm going to rewrite it and massage it a little bit more, and just to be aware of that. And a lot of times professors are okay with that, but you have to let them know ahead of time. You have to ask permission. If you don't, then they're going to come back to you and say, hey, if they're using Turnitin, there's a lot of similarity, a lot of text matching to something that you wrote last year. And then you have to have that discussion when you could have avoided it by letting them know up front that you've already worked on this topic, but you want to expand on it. And you're going to be looking at what you wrote previously and possibly making a little bit of adjustments to that. So that's a conversation you need to have with your professor. I have another question for you, another poll. And it has to do with whether or not you've actually used Turnitin as a student. Have you ever been in a class? All right. We don't have anyone here who has actually used Turnitin as a student. So hopefully this will be useful to you. The next questions, I guess they're not going to be applicable to this group since you've never used it. My questions had to do with, was it useful? How did you feel about it? And things like that. Did you think that the Turnitin report was helpful? But if you've never used it, you can't answer those questions. So we'll just move on. So when you submit your paper to Turnitin, what does it, I explained how it works. What does it find? What is it looking for? What does it find? Well, obviously it finds intentional plagiarism, like copy and paste. But that's not what we're looking at here. We're talking about the next group of them, the unintentional. You've worked really hard on your paper. You've done the best that you think you could. You think you have a solid draft, and you want to see if there might be some areas that you could improve on. So it will look for textual, is what it's called. That's the technical word, plagiarism, which is unintentional, which includes failure to cite, patch writing, which is where you take a text and you massage it a little bit. You might use the synonym finder, a thesaurus, and switch out words. You might leave out a couple of words and things like that. But the structure is basically the same as the source. And you really haven't included your own voice, your own words in it. You haven't paraphrased it really, because patch writing is a step below paraphrasing. It's closer to copy and paste than paraphrasing, but you definitely haven't summarized it in your own words. And it will point those out. It'll say, hey, this is way too close, too similar to this text here, which is probably your source. So it will show you that. It will also talk about insufficient or too close paraphrasing. So you worked on it, you tried to paraphrase it, but there's a little bit of a problem with it. It's just not paraphrased well enough. And it'll also help if you've misquoted something, if you left out a word that you put in there and things like that. So if the professor has not turned on leave out quotes, you'll get the misquoting. If they have turned on the feature that says don't include quotes, your misquoting won't come up, unfortunately. Are there any questions so far? I don't see any in the chat, so I'm going to move forward. Okay. Like I said, a lot of this has to do with how the professor, your instructor, makes the changes and customizes it for your class. Excluding small sources is one option they can turn on, which in a lot of cases, if you're writing in a discipline like education, there are certain phrases that you might use regularly and they come up all the time. Well, you don't want those phrases to be highlighted as too similar to someone else's paper because everyone is using them in that discipline. They also might include very common phrases a research paper might include, like in this paper I will present. And that phrase may be a one that almost, especially novice writers, might start off with. It's not the best way to do it, but the idea is not to penalize a student, but to point out areas where you could use better words. So sometimes a professor may exclude the small sources, and they get to decide what a small source is. Is it a percentage of words? Is it a number of words? Things like that. Remember earlier I said 6+ words? Well, they may decide it might be a string of 7 words. It's up to each professor. They may exclude quoted materials because a quote is going to reappear if someone uses the same quote or a portion of the same quote in a paper in another university or even in your class. especially if you're all writing on the same topics, then obviously you don't want to get a match to the quote, because as long as it's cited properly and it's got the quotation marks and everything else around it, you don't want the Turnitin to highlight it and say, this is too similar. So you exclude those, and therefore the it won't show up in the report. A bibliography, obviously, if you're all writing on the same topic, you will probably include some of the same sources. So a bibliography, or even if someone in another university writes on that topic, they may come across the same sources. So if you exclude the bibliography, they won't come up in the report. Full sources, and this is used when a professor maybe wants you to write a paper about a specific article the whole class read. So obviously that's going to be in your resource list, your reference list. And so that one gets excluded, and that can go on individual sources as well as just in general. They usually pick certain sources that they want them to not include searching for. Also happens if it is a draft. Obviously, if your first draft has a list of your references, the next time you submit it, you don't want those references dinged for already being in your draft. So those are things that can be due. And if an assignment has a template of some sort, you can upload, the professor can upload the template and say, exclude all these words that make up the template. And that could be a form, or it actually could be words, a group of words that have to be in it. A lot of times lab reports might have specific words that need to be included, and it's in a template of some sort. So those are the ways that the instructor can tweak the Turnitin so that when you get your results, it will be included or not included, and you'll have to look at them to see what Turnitin says about it.
I have a question, Susan.
Yes, sir.
Actually, it was from someone else in the chat. She asked, can Turnitin help check references or the correctness of the bibliography itself?
Yes, it can. It will go ahead, and there are certain features that are available, and Sonia's here. And Sonia, is that one of the features that is included with our version of Turnitin?
Can you repeat that question?
The question was, can Turnitin check for the accuracy of a bibliography?
So it just does exact matching. So it just matches the words. That's how come it's just like a similarity detector. It's not exactly a plagiarism checker. Does that make sense?
So if the citation on the reference list is in the correct format, it should come up as a similar to another paper where it's in the correct format. If it is not in the correct format, it may not be highlighted. And there are tools out there that we recommend that are available for students to learn the citation formatting and things like that. But I would not use it as a way of checking your bibliography to make sure you got everything in the right format. That not its
correct.
purpose.
That is correct.
Okay, any other questions? Okie doke. It's called a similarity report. Or maybe it's an originality. They'd be switching between the two terms. But the whole idea, like Sonia said, is that it looks for similarities in text. And just because it finds it does not mean that someone has plagiarized. Does not mean that it's not an original work by that person. It is a tool for the professors and you to use to check to make sure that you're not moving from wholly original work into the area that becomes a little bit gray and starts to go towards plagiarism. It's a tool that you can use to improve your writing so that you'll learn to better cite your sources. You'll learn to do the 3 areas that are recommended for writing, which we'll get into in just a minute, which is you can quote, you can paraphrase, and the best is summarizing, because that's wholly your voice supported by the sources that you use to learn that information. So don't really look at it as a plagiarizing tool, even though, you know, a checker, because even though your professor might say that, it really, I mean, just because you have a high score, which we'll talk about in just a minute, does not necessarily mean that the whole paper has been plagiarized, that it's been cut and paste from Wikipedia or something. So it only flags things. And in the resources, and I thank you, Sonia, she gave me this, is something from Turnitin called Understanding the Similarity Report. It's a student guide, and we will have that available for you. It's linked on our Turnitin presentation page, which you'll get a link in the chat shortly. But you'll get different colors, and the colors don't mean anything. They just assigned them. Blue means that nothing there's nothing similar to anything else that Turnitin searched in your paper. Green means that 1 to 24% of the words match someplace else. And depending on what your professor turned on and off as far as their customization, that could be phrases that were just general phrases out there. Again, this is flagging stuff for you to take a look at. It doesn't mean, yes, that there is a problem. It just means, hey, you need to go back and look at this to see if there is a problem. And then you go down to the different colors and the different percentages. So remember, just because you have a high percentage does not mean that your paper is not original or has been plagiarized. And so don't freak out when you possibly get a 63. That doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail because he's going to think, she's going to think I plagiarized. No, it's a way for you to go back and look, and there could be some really just quick things you can do to fix it. And the number goes down. So getting deeper into your results. First of all, the longer the paper, possibly the higher the percentage. They've got more text to look at, okay? And like I said before, the settings, what your professor included or excluded. And a lot of times you get false positives. That's why you have to look at each instance and review it. Common academic phrases, like I said before. Discipline-specific words. If you are talking about education, which is my field, as well as librarianship, there are certain words like educational leadership. That's just a phrase that if that's what you're writing about, you're going to have to find. That's one of the reasons why they always look for groups of words and not just 1 or 2 words. But let's say you had to write a paper and you had to list certain characteristics for a good superintendent or something like that, or a good teacher. You're going to have phrases in there in that list strung together that will make more than 6 words that you could find in a lot of papers that talk about good characteristics of a teacher or a superintendent. So that doesn't mean that you plagiarize them. I mean, those are characteristics that are written about all the time. So that's why you have to go back and look at each instance. And it's just, you're going to get a list of match sources in your report. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a minute. where your text is the same or similar to another place that they have found. They've matched it someplace. And this is what you're going to get. This is an example. They matched something to a New York Times article. And this is the text up here for the New York Times article. I don't know if you can see it, but the darkened spot right here is the matching text. And then if it's turned on, it's color coded in your paper. And this is number 6. This is the sentence that the student wrote. And if you look at it, there's only one word, knowledge. This person, the actual source said information, but the student said knowledge because they're similar type of words. As you can see, that has no citation to it. It's got no attribution. In other words, it doesn't say where the student doesn't tell you where they got it from. So in this case, it would be flagged. The student should look and say, what am I going to do to fix this? I can add a citation in here, but then it's really not paraphrased. It's more of a direct quote. So it should have quotations around it. And maybe they should switch this back out to knowledge instead of information. So there are ways to work on it. I mean, or they can just decide, I'm not going to use these words at all. I'm going to rewrite this in my own words, what it means to me, and still put a citation because it comes from the New York Times article, but then it becomes their voice and not parroting or just copying and pasting what the New York Times article said. So this is what you're going to get for each individual instance of a matched source. And it will tell you if it's an internet source, and if it's got more than a higher percentage. When you click on this little arrow right here, it'll give a drop down menu that will show you exactly where it found it. And you can click on each one and it will show you the text that it found. And then you can make a decision at that point on what to do. And that's what the next slide is about. But first of all, we're going to talk about high numbers. I talked about this a little bit already. It all depends on the type of assignment. If you're doing a literature review or an annotated bibliography, they may have higher percentage, higher matches, just because you have a lot of text that you have to include in things like that. But some of those you just might have left something off. You may be using same sources as other people who have written on your topic. Talked about that before too. And if the bibliography is excluded, then you might not see this as much of a high number, but some professors don't turn that off. And it all depends on what they do. A lot of it depends on the instructor. What can you do to improve it? First of all, whoops, sorry. First of all, you need to see if your assignment has any limitations on the amount of quoting. Obviously, a paper that is 75% quotes and 25% your own text, that is probably not going to fly with an instructor. Some instructors are very specific, though, on how much quoting you can do. They want to hear your voice. They don't want you to just keep on quoting all the sources that you use to write your paper. They want to know, what do you think about what you read? What is your opinion? And then use the sources to support it. So an assignment may have limits on the amount of quoting. Can't emphasize this enough. No matter where you go about writing, practically any study skills, they say start early, even if it's only bits and pieces. I mean, you might only work on one section, which might be a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs. Start with that. Do a little bit. Work it in, you know, try to insert your voice in it. And there are lots of things out there on the internet, and I'll give you some resources. There are books out there on how to improve your academic writing. You know, how They Say, I Say is a classic book that we have at NMSU, excuse me, at DACC. I think it's also used at NMSU, and it's talking about using sources to help improve your writing and how to do it in the correct manner. If you were given the option, and this is what we encourage our instructors to do, is allow there to be a draft assignment where you can submit your draft. And you can submit it more than once. So you submit the draft when the assignment opens fairly soon after that. Then you write more. After you've looked at the report, you might massage some things, and then you submit another draft, because the multiple drafts will show you where you still need to continue working on your writing, where it's a little too close to that red line that you're that we all don't want to cross in academic writing. If possible, well, no, you definitely need to review your results. Did you forget to add quotation marks or citation? That may be all it is. There are instances where a person put a quotation mark at the front, but they forgot to put it at the back. And so it comes up as being too similar to the source it came from. And it's just a matter of adding that second quotation mark, and then the match goes away. If you do that, if you add a quotation mark or you add a citation, always double check your reference list to make sure that you've included it down there as well. That's just should be a habit you get into. If at all possible, take time to discuss your results with your professor. If they give you the option to do a draft, set aside 15 minutes if you can, face-to-face, through Zoom, however, and say, hey, I submitted my draft. This is my report. I have some questions. Can you help me with it? That shows the professor that you were interested in improving your writing, that you're a little bit concerned about some of the results that come through, and you know that there are areas that you can make changes to that will make it a better paper. So all of those are next steps. There's also some more things you can do. Practice writing, continue to practice writing. The more you write, the better you're going to get at it. That's for a lot of skills. This quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, those are the 3 levels, starting with the most basic. When you're incorporating references, you quote someone, you take the text directly from your source, you put it in quotes, and then you put your citation. Okay, word for word. That's not always the best. That's not really putting your voice into your paper. Paraphrasing, that's the next step. And that is a little bit harder, and it needs to be practiced, how you can paraphrase something. Paraphrasing is a skill that there are tools out there to practice with, and I'm going to give them to you as part of the references. There are many ways that you can go out there. We have online tools here. We have books that give you examples of it. And there's plenty of things out there on the internet to practice paraphrasing. Summarizing is the best because you're pretty much reading something, setting it aside, and then writing in your own words what you just read. You're not looking at the text. You're not having it in front of you to pick and choose what you want to say. You just write from memory what you are just read. Now you can come back and look at the source text afterwards and add a citation. Maybe you want to add a quote in there someplace, or if you're using some words that you read that you realize, I can't write it any other way. I need to put a quote around this phrase or this sentence or whatever and give it proper citation. But that is the best of the academic writing practices, is to be able to summarize something. We have several presentations. One of them is incorporating sources. That was done a few semesters back by Jose, and that gives you some tools to do that. It gives you some resources as well. I teach a series of research strategy workshops, and the fifth one in the series, the last one, talks about plagiarism and how to avoid it, but it also goes into more depth about quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, and even gives you some strategies. So that is, I have a link in the resources to the website that actually shows you all the tools and things like that, which we will be giving you at the end as well. And then we have 2 online tools through the library, BrainFuse and Learning Express. Now, BrainFuse is available to both NMSU and DACC students. Learning Express is only available to DACC, and they include tutorials, they include practicing, they include, in some cases, videos, a lot of different options for you to do your practicing. So these are all sources that are out there. Additional help. I broke it down a little bit. At DACC, we have the Academic Resource Center, and we have writing tutors. NMSU has a writing center and a Student Success Center. The tutors are in the Student Success Center, but the writing center is set up to help people with writing. So, and DACC students can go to the writing center. I talked about BrainFuse, and we have a library guard with an overview presentation for BrainFuse out there. We also have one for Learning Express and a overview presentation for that. We have several library guides that we've created. That's the ones that would be most applicable to this topic. And NMSU has their own library guides. Now you can switch, you can go and look at ours if you're an NMSU student, and if you're DACC, you can actually go over and look at the NMSU. There is some overlap, obviously, but it wouldn't hurt to look at both of them. We, DACC, has a lot of books on academic writing, and the link that Jose just put in the chat is to the page that has this presentation in PDF format, as well as the list of links and stuff. So when you click on that books link right there, you're going to go to a search within our library catalog that will give us you online and physical books about academic writing. So you don't even have to type in anything, you just have to click on the link. On NMSU, they don't have the same thing, but I did provide a link to the catalog. And then everyone is available. You can take the research writing, the research strategies workshops. Number 5 is going to be at the end of March. We're starting up in a couple of weeks with the first of the series of 5. And there's how you can register, and there's the link to the workshop page. And then, like I said, there's several presentations we've already done on how to write good notes, how to incorporate your sources, how to write a thesis statement. Jose did several of these a couple semesters back, and they've got tons of information in it. They're all about 30 minutes long, give or take, so it won't take up a lot of time, but the resources you're going to get from them will be immeasurable. Almost done. Are there any questions so far?
No.
Okay. There's a few other resources. This is the online student help directly to the Turnitin website. It's a series of pages. So what I did is I actually did PDFs of all the student pages and I combined them all together and made it into one thing. So if you're offline, you can have what Turnitin says about each one of the features. You can just download that. There's a couple of videos. There is another library's research guide on how using Turnitin. And then Penn State has put together something about the originality or the similarity report. I think they're been rebranded from Turnitin, but they provide the same information. It looks the same. So some places might call it an originality report. Some might call it a similarity report. They may or may not have updated their sources. Okay. Now's the time to ask any questions that I haven't covered anything. All right. Here's all our references that I've talked about. And if I will go to, here's our homepage for the library. And if you click on the databases, from here, you can go to BrainFuse. Here's BrainFuse Help Now. This is for NMSU. This one is for DACC. You can go down to Learning Express, which we did the core English skills. So both of those are available through our databases. Our research guides, all of this is under the library presentation. So you'd go down there. And once you clicked on that, which is library presentations, you're going to get our home page here. And then from there, you're going to see we have our list of spring. I knew this was going to happen. We've already done sharpening your critical thinking skills last month, and now we're doing Turnitin. And each presentation has its own page. And this is the one where Jose put the link in, the Turnitin presentation webpage. And what it will have in just a short bit is a copy of this presentation. You can get a PDF of all of these references, or you can just go to this website and start clicking on things. Here is the similarity report that was given to us from NMSU. And it's set up for a student. I would highly recommend that we download it. And then down here, this is the PDF, the compiled of all the pages for that. If you as an instructor is going to use, do not check the, yes, enable translated matching. Oh, it's broken. Okay. I think that is a special tool that is set up for if you've got a, let's say, a Spanish speaking student who wants to write in their mother tongue. It can translate it into English, and then it will search based upon that. I don't think Turnitin, well, I know that they've got a lot of languages. I don't know how they search for languages other than English, because we know that there are databases out there in other countries and other languages and things like that. And we even have access to Informe, which is a library, Spanish speaking library database. Anyway, this is the understanding. There's the picture, and it talks about all this. So this is one that if you're an instructor, I would definitely attach to your Canvas page or hand out to your student. If you're a student, this is what I would recommend that you go ahead and have a copy available to you. Well, let's see. I think we are pretty much at the end. Sorry, I ran a little bit. We talked about how it works, how to interpret your results, how to improve your writing, and where to go to get additional help. Our next presentation is next month. It will be done by our director, Teresa DeSimio. She's going to talk about how to Google like a librarian, how to really use that type of knowledge that we have and apply it to Google. We do have a survey we would like you to finish our presentation out with. It really helps us improve what we are doing, as well as if you have any ideas of what you would like future presentations to be, there's a space on the form for that too. So I appreciate you coming, and thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Susan.